Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to that 1 hour podcast that's all about game development and the lifestyle thereof, game developers, game players, and people who critique games. And I am doing this podcast alone for right now, and that time is over because I obviously don't do this by myself. It's not good for my health. Fresh off the top shelf, Mr. Brandon Fan.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the first episode of a new segment that we're adding to the podcast. We're going to try this out, so hang on for the ride. It's a segment called Pop Culture Thoughts, Thots, with Shora, Farahani. He's going to be our expert, and we're just going to see how it goes. Non-traditionally, we're going to do off the cuff, so bear with us, guys. These are opinions expressed by us and not by our companies. Sure, how you doing, man?
Hey guys, thanks for having me back. It's been a while, more than a year.
Exactly.
Yeah, glad to see you guys again. Actually, I work with Brandon. I see him every day, but nevertheless, good to see Larry.
Yes.
And just to jump in before we get into the deep waters, thought is a unisex term. I just want to say. So, I know some guy thoughts out there.
So again, look in the description if you want to. Shora obviously has been on the episode before or on the podcast before, so if you want to link to his previous episodes, go ahead and look for it. Shora, just a really quick background of just run through your resume real quick for first time listeners out there to kind of understand who you are.
Yeah.
So I'm originally from Iran. I came to USA about 12, 13 years ago. Actually 13 now. And I came to study at Academy of Art University. I had my bachelor's and master's, but I came for the art school here. I was mostly computer engineering. And I came here, I had like I started doing a couple of short films on my own, all CG, and eventually one of them landed me a job at Raven Software. So I started working on a couple of Call of Duties at Raven. I moved to Wisconsin for 2 years and then moved back to Bay Area. I transferred to Sledgehammer to work on Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. And I was at Sledgehammer for 2+ years. I kind of got laid off. At the time I was on work visa. My visa kind of got screwed. And I landed in a small startup at the time called Outward. So that small startup, when I joined them, we were less than 15 people. And I was there for 2 years. We were mostly toward modernizing furniture industry. So imagine like when you go to a website for a furniture, now you can completely customize your order. You can see it in 3D. You can rotate it, like play with the lighting, see it in the environment. Now there is VR, AR apps. It's going a distance now, that market. So I was there for 2+ years as well. And that company eventually, when I left, we were 100 people, 100+. That company was sold to Williams-Sonoma for $110 million. And now so my kind of role was kind of finished there because they were now established. I went there as essentially someone who would pitch new ideas for different companies. And now I started working at Pocket Gems, which is a mobile game company. And this time I'm on actually a very female-oriented game that actually caters toward actually teenage girls. And it's actually a very interesting topic and a very interesting group to work with. And the game is called Episode. It has like over 150 million, 150 million downloads. It's crazy.
Oh, nice.
Bank. So this segment, just kind of preface it. All right, we're all game developers, and if you're a longtime listener, you know we interview game developers. We talk about game developers' lifestyle and everything that pertains to it. Pop culture is kind of like, we're influenced by a lot of things outside of game news, and this is kind of to kind of get everyone's opinion, everything that's happening right now in comic, movies, entertainment, whatever. And the reason why we have Shora on is because Shora has always had an interesting perspective, especially on pop culture, and I feel like it's a great opportunity for us to kind of delve into his brain and.
By the way, just a quick topic.
All right.
Just a quick topic. I listened to your podcast last week. It was very, very intelligent conversation. It was very good. How much backlash did you get? Because because that topic is so sensitive. No matter how intelligent you try to talk about it, it's a lose-lose situation for us.
You're referring to the sexism at Riot Games episode.
Yes, that topic was covered. Because Larry had a little very reasonable, good arguments he was trying to play a little of devil's advocate in the process. And I actually stand by his side, but I'm wondering how much backlash he has got.
I'll tell you what, I haven't checked the reviews yet, but our email inbox is pretty light. We got a couple of pats on the backs and nothing like kill yourself, jump off a cliff.
Yeah, nothing negative.
My sister,
Yeah, I think it's been mostly we had a lot of engagement on it. Obviously, it's a topic that everyone is interested in. It's the topic of the week right now. So, but nothing negative. Like nothing we said. We were, I would say, pretty careful and fair to kind of present. Not just shine a light on Riot Games, but on sexism itself. And we were, I feel like, as fair as we can be. Us being two males in the industry.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, I have tried sometimes to engage in this conversation, and as hard as you try to be keep the conversation polite and reasonable, because I'm not saying all of it, but there's
what were you doing with your hands? Maybe that has something to do with it.
Well, no,
your approach might be too aggressive. Maybe.
No, it's in general though in our gaming culture. There's and I think some of the females that sometimes we deal with are not the typical females of pop culture that they are. So they have a very different perspective on a lot of the female aspects of the conversation. So it's a very sensitive topic to them, especially since they have fought so hard to get to where they are now. And they have been always against what the female other females have been in the pop culture. So it's very sensitive to them. So that's why when you engage in them and try to, because a lot of my background has been with, females who actually enjoy the normal pop culture stuff. And when you try to engage it from that perspective, they strongly stand against you. So it's a very, as I said, sensitive topic.
Do you have a specific example?
No, but there has been conversations with people that I've had, and there was a point that I was I can't argue with this because the conversation suddenly diverts to something else completely, and it's not beneficial to anyone. And these are the things that actually brings careers down.
Well, how about this? Let's just give a shout out to all the strong women who have survived and endured way more than their male counterparts just to do the same amount of work. Shout out to all of them.
Very fair.
Holding it down.
Yeah. So, I mean, what has happened lately that has irked you besides that?
Who's thought number one? Thought number one.
No, thought number actually it's not a bad thought. I haven't seen this week we have Crazy Rich Asians, the movie.
All right.
But
Iranian, right? You count as an Asian, right? So
yeah, you are. But that movie is fully made. It's American, English language movie. Even though, and the production companies, everyone is American, but the cast is full Asian descent and East Asian. Let's say it's East Asian. And the funny thing is when you tell some people that Middle East is mostly Asia, that people will be no, it's not, but it is. So, but
sure, you're your own thing,
but in general, I think, and it has a director who's also John Chu, who's of Asian descent. So it's very strong from a Hollywood studio that does such a thing. And we had earlier this year also Black Panther, which was also very much led by a full, African American cast, and very, very successful. So it's just like those two bring like a lot, has brought a lot of life to Hollywood that hey, maybe this actually works. People care about this thing. So
yeah, man. I feel like Hollywood in general is like, hey, all people want is cornflakes, and 8 different companies are giving us cornflakes. You know what I mean? And then someone's like, hey, how about some Lucky Charms? Let's mix it up. And
I actually haven't, as I said, I haven't seen Crazy Rich Asians. I enjoyed Black Panther, but my only topic that irks me about these movies is that they're kind of critic proof. That whenever you try to criticize them, even in the context of filmmaking or the quality of the acting or whatnot, the conversation again diverts to something else. Right.
Well, let me ask you this: do you feel like you're afraid of making an actual like a fair criticism of the movie just because of backlash in general, or do you feel like critics who would try to still kind of go towards the old tactics of being racially biased, or you know what I mean? Like, I guess where do you feel like more of the blame is? You're unable to criticize it, or?
Well, for me, again, I am a minority myself, I guess, but in general, I'm a white guy, so I like, for me, coming from a different country, these things I always like. We had like Prince of Persia. It never bothered me that, let's say, they casted Jake Gyllenhaal in the movie. He didn't even bother to have an accent in the movie. I don't care. It's an American produced movie.
You're right. I don't even think of that.
So it's an American produced movie with the Hollywood talent. Do whatever you want to do. Sure, your movie title is Prince of Persia, but it's from your perspective. Or 300, it's from a perspective of like Frank Miller, who's a comic artist who made this thing. It's a comic. No one said like the fact that you think, I have to criticize this because I'm Persian. It's insulting me now. I honestly. But I actually, at the time, visually really, really liked 300. So, and a lot of people hated me for that because they were like, "You're a traitor to your country,"
Let me let it.
I'm sorry though, but like, if they were like, "Hey, Lionsgate Film presents Shaka Zulu, the original story, starring Brad Pitt," I'd have a hard time being like, it's your version.
Here's the Asian perspective, right? So this is why Crazy Rich Asian is making such an impact. First of all, it has to be on a merit of its own, be a good movie, right? So far, from what I've heard from friends,
it's a good movie. That's the big thing. Like Black Panther was a good movie. Exactly. That's the thing.
That's so. As far as quality, that has to hit the mark, no matter what you're trying to do, right? So that has to be the first thing. It passed that. So the reason why Asian Americans especially have been kind of feel ousted in Hollywood is the reason that it's been years and years and years of misrepresentation. Especially the Asian male, right? And the Asian female is always over-sexualized, right? 25 years since an all Asian American cast has been in a movie, which is the Joy Luck Club, right? Before that, you got your Jackie Chan here and there, but really the biggest impact before the Joy Luck Club has been like maybe Bruce Lee in the 1970s, right? Before even Asians even stepped in Hollywood, he was the very first. So there's a long history of misrepresentation of Asians, and usually in a very bad light, right? You talk about 300. Yes, they're not speaking accent, but these are freaking buff ass Romans and everything. These guys are fine, and the Persian or the king is like 7 feet tall. No one's misrepresenting. I'll take that as a compliment, right?
No, it's not, dude. That king looks terrible. That king, actually, Xerxes was such a badass in history.
He's the one Persian who was like buff. Every other one was like henchman Persian.
And in general, like Xerxes in actual history, he was such a badass that they kind of make a joke out of him. But again, I completely accept that this is a fantasy. It's from a comic book perspective. So for me, I judge the movie by its narrative and like, you know, the visuals and all the qualities of that makes a good film.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, so for me, the only thing that irks me about these movies is the critic proofness of them. Other than that,
Yeah.
It's very hard to argue about the merits of these movies, about how good they are or how there's something wrong in them, and without somebody suddenly changing the conversation to something different.
You know what? I think if I look at what you're saying about critic proof, I get where that comes from actually, because it's like, hey, finally the Asian audience has representation. It's a great execution. It's a good piece of film. We should we should form a community around supporting this piece, right? And then to be fair, you know, you do have to criticize it and say this is good, this is bad.
Yeah.
And I would say being critic proof would probably to me be more about, are you just going to trash the film and be like, this is bad, that was bad, they also did this wrong, they also did that wrong, like pointing out all the negatives to me would come across as a, see, this is why we don't do this, you know what I mean? Versus a, like, if you're like, hey, this film is good, this is great, I like this, and I didn't like this, I didn't like this, and I think that could have been better. If it was a constructive approach to it, I would have no problem,
of course.
You know, with somebody being like, hey, here's where your film could have been better, you know?
Yeah, but to me, like, I've tried, like, especially with regards to, like, Black Panther, I think the third act of the movie is kind of weak. Like the first act and the second act are very good, but the third act in Wakanda is actually kind of weak. And the moment you start talking, hey, I didn't enjoy the last third of the movie, it's like every other Marvel movie that the last third kind of falls flat. Suddenly, it's back to, hey, what, you hate this movie? I'm like, no, I'm arguing this movie is good. There's you know
what?
But the topic of the conversation suddenly changes to something that you don't expect.
Don't talk movies with those guys you play basketball with.
No, I remember there was another movie with the Disney animated tune, the one with the bunny. What was it? That was kind of critic proof too, because it was
Alice in Wonderland.
No,
or
the
Peter
one
Rabbit.
with the CG one, the recent one, that one.
Peter Rabbit.
No,
was that Disney though?
I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think Disney did a recent CG
Zootopia. So Zootopia.
You didn't like Zootopia?
No, I think it's a decent movie, but Zootopia again had that aspect of critic proofness. Came at the very, very timely situation that, again, that movie was all about race undertones, even though it was made for kids, and then they had all these cops that were, you know, essentially were representing, like, you know, African American cops, kind of, if you read into it, and then at the time we had all these, like, you know, actually no, the cops were not, but in general, I remember there was a lot of real world consequence to what was happening, and suddenly no one could argue that, hey, Zootopia, there is parts of it that falls flat, and there's parts of it that are very, very well animated, very good, you know, good watch. So yeah, I enjoy these movies, but it's very hard to talk about them.
Okay. Well, how about a movie we can talk about that you feel like was polarizing?
Yeah, what have you been watching lately, dude?
I just watched Mission Impossible 6 last night. It was incredible.
Really?
I can't believe a 50-year-old man can run so good.
He's like almost 60 now, yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't age.
Tom Cruise does his own stunts.
I feel like he's gonna die in one of these Mission Impossible movies.
Oh, don't say that. Don't say that.
He literally actually breaks his leg in one of the shots that he does in this movie, and like the shot is in the movie that he breaks his leg, and they shut down production for 3 months for this product. The cost of the movie is ballooned by $30 million because he breaks his leg for 3 months, so they can't shoot the movie, but they have to keep the cast. And even like Superman has to go do reshoots for like Justice League, and they have to CG his mustache and all that thing for this movie. So it has a lot of consequence, but in general, I think it's a really, really good, well-produced movie.
Isn't it cheaper to just make him a fake mustache when he comes back from Mission Impossible?
I don't know what the reasoning was.
apparently it was part of his contract to have the mustache on Mission Impossible set. So they couldn't overlap
They
it.
do everything real Larry on that thing. No fake stunts, no fake mustaches.
Jesus.
Is there any other action film that has that much hype anymore? I mean, the Bonds for a while kind of had that Bourne Identity element to it. They were trying to rough it up a bit. But in terms of action films, like, I don't think the reason why Mission Impossible is so successful is because of the stunts. It has a certain rawness to it, right? Is that what's
And I think it's because actually this is the first time the director came back, but I think all the Mission Impossibles have essentially an author director, what we call author in movies, which is like someone who puts their own stamp on the movie, and all of them have been made by an author, and each one of them, if you watch them separately, it has the traits of that director injected into that Mission Impossible, even though Tom Cruise is the main element and his stunts, but it's the director. Let's say the first one is Brian De Palma. He's a very guy who makes a lot of like spy movies and a lot of mystery. And the first one is very mysterious. The second one is very John Woo. The third one is very Brad Bird. The fourth one is Brad Bird. The third one is J.J. Abrams with a lot of his like mystery box and like, you know, all the MacGuffins and rabbit's foot, everything that he has. And then this fifth one and sixth one is by a guy who really likes brute action movies. And the fifth and the sixth are very much brute action movies. But this one is really, really good. And I recommend people watch it.
I think that added element of someone whose style really fits the franchise or defines the franchise, but is able to kind of learn from the first experience and that process. It's really relative to any type of art form, really. It's like if you go back to do it the second time, there's a lot of more efficiency and I think excitement that comes with it. I have yet to see it. I want to see it more so than most action films.
And definitely watch it in a big screen with good audio. There is a lot of goodness to it. Other thing that it's not popular in America. It's not a movie. It's a TV show that's very popular in UK, and kind of is because of my job. Again, as I said, I currently work in a game that caters toward female audience. We actually had to play a game version of this TV show called Love Island. I don't know if you guys have heard of Love Island, but
no, explain it to us for the first.
It's essentially the biggest show on UK TV. It just finished about 2 weeks ago. So it's essentially, if you take all the good elements from like, you know, Big Brother, all these reality TV shows that are competition based, if you take the good romantic aspects, there is a reason like Bachelor has such a big audience in USA, and but Bachelor is kind of actually terrible compared to this show. But there is elements of like Big Brother, elements of Bachelor, and if you put them together, you have Love Island, which is you have a group of couples, a group of men and a group of women that come in. They're all single. They couple up. They keep adding cast to it, and people have to couples replace themselves. Like, you know, the males find new, you know, female companions, and vice versa. And yeah, the show is very, very entertaining.
We have something similar. I think ours is like Bachelor or Bachelorette in Paradise or something.
Yeah, like Bachelor in Paradise is very cheesy though. Like compared to like Love Island, it's a lot cheesier, and it's very fun. And the only way to watch it in USA right now is actually on Hulu. But yeah, it was very entertaining. And then they have a game version, which is very similar to the game that I work on. And they actually did a very good job for people who enjoy this show to play this game as well on mobile.
So what do you do that makes it so great? If you could just sum it up in 40 seconds, like the gameplay experience.
The gameplay is a lot of tap, but it's building relationship. Like it's like you have to woo. Like let's say you pick I think you pick a female character, and you have to woo a guy, and there are like 4 or 5 guys in this house, so you have to choose which one you're gonna companion with. But in the meantime, you have to talk to other females, see who likes who. So it's a lot of balancing act of like, how do I not hurt the other female? Meanwhile, I stick to the guy that I like. So it's very like entertaining.
What's the best strategy that seems to land the guy the best and
not get evicted
and not upset the other women?
Well, it's you have to play it again. This is a very, I think for your audience, it's again, even the game that I work episode is very different, sort of like game. Right. But in general, it has its own audience.
Of course.
And it's funny, like when I was interviewing for this job, I was just like, how much like so I never played this game before. So before my interview, I go and start to familiarize myself with this game, and I look at the data and I see that because the game has an aspect that users can create their own narratives, and some of these user-based narratives have actually about over 50 million downloads, and I suddenly realized the scale of the game and how much untapped market is for these sort of games.
Yeah, even the mod has 50 million downloads. That's crazy.
But the amount of revenue you have is a lot less compared to, let's say, like Fortnite. Fortnite is just plowing right now, but in general, it's still very it's a very hot actually genre in mobile app store. There's like 5 different games that each one are fighting for the market share.
Yeah. Well, you kind of mentioned Fortnite. So what are your thoughts on the Battle Royale?
Speaking of, about a year ago, I think I predicted that this thing is going to sweep the nation, didn't I? I said, like, in our conversation.
We'll have to dig back in the crates and see what you said. But what do you think you said?
I know exactly what I said. I said every game is gonna have a battle royale mode. And Fortnite wasn't even out yet. It was only PUBG at the time. Yeah. And I said, because it's other than the network issues, it's a very easy thing to implement because the design element of it is very established. It's only the network aspect of it that you have to support 100 players in one match. But at the time I said every game is gonna have a version of this in a span of like 6 months to a year, and lo and behold, we are here. And I never thought it's gonna be this big, but now it's crazy. I used to have a bet at Sledgehammer with a lot of people because Evolved came out, and I predicted that game. A multiplayer only game is never gonna sell more than 3 million copies. Like I had a lot of bets going on with Titanfall. With
you definitely lost that bet.
Yeah, let's check that. What's a multiplayer only game that sold more than 3 million copies, Larry?
Fortnite, PUBG.
and PUBG. Don't forget PUBG.
I'll say if you mean like a premium version of that game, then I'll just say PUBG, right?
Yeah.
Because Fortnite
PUBG number is still very huge. It's about 20 million copies at least.
I would say I can see why you would say during Evolve coming out, looking at Evolve as the one that you're using as the base point to say, I don't think a multiplayer only game would sell more than X million copies, right? Because that was before Battle Royale became the thing.
Yeah.
Now that Battle Royale is the thing, I don't think, obviously, that bet doesn't hold up anymore.
Well, no, in general, I think too, right? Overwatch was a multiplayer only.
$40. Multiplayer only. Yeah,
that's
premium
pretty
multiplayer
high
only.
Too.
Yeah.
But in general, at the time, because it was the start of the generation and like this generation of Xbox One, and the fastest way a company could generate some revenue or create a game the fastest, it would be multiplayer only. But they were teasing these games as so big that the multiplayer would be big enough for you. So we had so many games, and a lot of them actually flopped. If you look at it, it was Evolved. It was the Gearbox game. It was
Lawbreakers.
Yeah, Lawbreakers. There was a lot of. I remember.
The next one after that, Heights, Radical Heights.
Yeah, and even the Epic game, Epic had their own game that
Paragon.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
that wasn't a
Paragon.
premium, but it definitely was multiplayer only. Paragon has gone down. Fortnite Save the World, I think, is
Paragon, yeah.
probably 0.00001% of the gameplay time of the overall
Yeah,
Fortnite gameplay
and
time because people play the Battle Royale.
and then you had Titanfall. A lot of these
Oh,
games
man.
at the time, I was like, a lot of people were like, actually, if you take half of the Call of Duty, it's still probably rather than 20 million would sell 10 million copies. And I was no, it's actually the wrong,
Yeah.
calculation because the whole package is the one that
The
brings
whole
20
package
million.
is the 20
Yeah.
million. Yeah.
So for me,
Well,
yeah, I was arguing with a lot of people, and I never thought PUBG's number is going to be this big. Yeah.
so I think what's interesting is I'm going to say two quick things. One is I'm actually really excited to see how Black Ops 4 does.
Yeah, I'm
Apart
very
from working
curious
on a
too.
COD myself, there was always those talks of like, will they do it without single player? Will they do it without single player? Now they're kind of in a position where they are doing it without single player. It's just unfortunate that the market, competitive multiplayer gaming, has shifted so far away from where COD was dominating
Yeah, team
into
deathmatch.
new game modes that they're playing catch up by adding those game modes into the game.
Yeah.
But I'm still really excited to see how well COD
will
multiplayer
will you
alone
play
sells.
it? Will you pay
Yeah.
$60 for Black
Oh,
Ops 4?
oh man, 60. Whew. Yeah, we'll see. I'm not gonna.
Well, I
Like
mean,
I
let's
personally
be
would
fair.
not.
All right, if we were to compare like previous COD, right? COD has always been like a heavy load for $60. It's like best bang for your buck. You're getting 3 different games basically before, but because of that previous comparison, right? Now that they take a huge component out, it feels less than what you paid for last year. So let's rub the crystal ball a bit. Sure, how do you feel Black Ops is gonna do this year? How is it gonna affect the
Let's say
Activision bottom line?
first
Well,
quarter sales. So not like the overall lifespan, but like how many within a month? How many sales within a month?
I don't think. I think it's gonna be the biggest flop of all the Call of Duties.
Ooh.
Black Ops is like the biggest.
Like I personally can care less about Black Ops 4 at the moment,
Yeah, I feel
and
about the same.
I'm a Call of Duty guy, and um, like for me, also I think in the battle royale mode, like before COD, there is Red Dead Redemption that probably has a battle
It's gonna take
royale
a hit.
mode.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh man,
So
Red Dead Battle Royale would be insane, dude.
insane.
Cowboy
And
Battle
then
Royale though?
and the funny thing is also I think Battlefield 5 no one cares about it either.
Mm.
It's the funniest thing that no
So do
one.
you? Well, they haven't unveiled their battle royale, which I feel like their engine, if anything, in military shooter. People still love military shooters. So do you feel like I don't think they're gonna eclipse COD this year, but I feel like that number is inching closer and closer every year. Do you feel like this is gonna be the year
I,
that
I honestly
Battlefield can
think
brag?
actually Battlefield hype is so dead at the moment. So I personally like just an estimate that I'm talking to other people. I've never heard a single person saying like Battlefield 5 is gonna do any well. And I
Mm.
think one of the EA top guys just quit because essentially the pre-order numbers for Battlefield 5 is very, very low, comparatively. Again,
Dude, like the thing is like I'm always gonna preach this because I want people who look at Microsoft Excel spreadsheets all day and make video game sales decisions and marketing decisions to understand. They've been supporting these products for over a decade, right? So like the people who loved it when it first started are now 10 years older in their life cycle, right? So we're talking went from teenager to now family man, family mom. You know what I mean? Went
yeah,
from maybe middle age to now upper younger like old age. You know what I mean? And so you always have to look at how fast are you introducing new people as you expect your top end people to be leaving. And all the young people who should be replacing the 18-year-olds that are playing Battlefields and CODs now grew up on iPhone apps, grew up on fucking Match 3 and like Candy Crush or whatever little cheap free to play, free microtransaction based gameplay. Loved Pokemon Go, loved all this stuff, didn't play any console military shooters. They're now becoming 16, 17-year-olds. And you know what? They play Fortnite because Fortnite is on the phone. Fortnite is on the
Yeah,
PC. Fortnite is everywhere where all their friends are.
yeah.
You know
yeah.
what I mean?
They
You know,
need to
All
have a mobile version of these games, or else they're gonna fall behind.
Yeah, they just assume that just because you're like 17, 18, that you're just going to go to COD because that's what you do. But you have to really think about over the 10 years, somebody who was 6 years old, now 16, somebody, or I should say, someone who was 8 year old is now 18. You know what I mean? And where was COD in their life? Where was Battlefield in their life?
Yeah,
People
it's not the
say it was
same.
still there because you hear a lot of young people online cussing and screaming, F you new, blah, blah, blah. But I'm telling you, these guys who are supposed to be replacing the young customers I've completely missed the boat. They're onto different product right now,
And Larry,
and I think
one
that
thing that really was funny is the fact that I just told you, like, would you pay $60 for Call of Duty, and you were like, woo, maybe not.
yeah,
So the spending habits of the other generation, the mobile generation, is
yeah,
so different
yeah,
because
exactly.
they might actually, because we were, as I said, we were maybe just playing this like we were testing this like Love Island game, and my art director, she spent $15 in the game easy. She was like, no problem, I just wanted to see the option.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, the whole Destiny community argues so much about spending $15 for like a 8 month, 9 month, like, support DLC. Are we gonna spend this $15 or not? And there's so many topics written over it, so much conversation,
Hmm.
and we think so much about that $15. Meanwhile, the mobile generation, they don't care. They easily spend that $15 on a 1 hour experience.
I think the hard thing though is I'll say that I'm part of the Destiny generation because when Destiny was introduced, I was still spending $60 on games.
Yeah,
The hard part for me is like when I saw that $60 games were now creepily evolving into $120 games through
yeah.
quarterly DLC purchases that they expected me to play or not be up to date with the content. You know what I mean? So that's hard for me. But I also will say that like I never had a problem getting a free iPhone game, enjoying it, getting hooked, and then being like, oh, 99 cents for more gems. Cool. This is now a 99-cent game for me. You know what I mean? It's not a
Yeah.
$61 game.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's the spending habit of this
Yeah.
generation. The
Yeah.
newer generation is very different than ours, I think.
Much different. $60 is like a purchase where you're thinking about bills that you could have paid. Whereas if like $5, $6 is under that line of like, yeah, sure, do it. Because you're like, oh, that's just $5.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody has that threshold of like, oh, it's this is negligible money. Even if they do it 6 times in a row, they spend $10. They've spent a negligible amount 6 times versus a one-time $60 purchase is like, okay, hold on a second. Let me let me look at this now.
But if you put it together, they actually spend more. Like
Yeah.
Yeah. End
the
result. Yeah.
Mm.
yeah. So
People usually spend. It's a lot harder for someone to spend to take them from $0 to $100,
Mm.
but it's a lot easier for them to incrementally get there because
Yeah.
rationally they just worked itself out where it's like 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. I'm already at 8, might as well spend 20, 20 to 4. That's
Yeah.
the key right there, which I think consoles really miss now
Mm.
because it's always buy in or out,
Yeah. You know what's
So
interesting? I do got to say this is it would be cool. I don't want to say cool. I'm wondering if the $60 title will ever shift into some sort of like hybrid model, more so, more closer to like games as a service, where it's like, hey, we can do this much content to get initial customer buy-in, and then here's our rollout plan to do additional updates that will eventually lead up to $60 worth of purchase price. That risk is if the game is a turd, we've spent 1/5 of the money. You know what I
I
mean?
think we're gonna see that actually this side with this year of Destiny, the new one.
Mhm.
Actually, something that I talked to Brandon about. I really think did you guys play Destiny 2 or not? I
no,
think
I played like about 2 hours of Destiny
yeah,
2.
I stopped.
so. Destiny 2. So Destiny 1 was very hardcore,
Yeah, I love
and
Destiny 1.
yeah, Destiny 1 is great, but initially the game was ultra hardcore.
Mhm.
And then they realized, hey, this is too hardcore. And over the course of 2 DLCs, they made softened the game. So
Mhm.
people could eventually, let's say, get Galahorn or like, all these other exotics. But
Mhm.
initially, the hump was so difficult for a lot of people. So Destiny 2, they did the reverse. they started with a lot more casual friendly, and they realized, hey, this audience actually likes that initial hump. They like the difficulty. So over the course of these past 2 DLCs, they have actually brought the Destiny to what good Destiny 1 was, like in the end. Like, you know, it was very, you always had something to pursue. It was very, like, you still get the joy of, oh my God, I did this. But at the same time, you always have something to pursue. The vanilla Destiny 2 did not have that. They just gave you a lot of the exotics so easy. It removed that sense of joy, that sense of mystery. So they have actually made Destiny 2 good again. And now the new DLC is coming. But the plan for this one is there's the initial $40 purchase for the DLC pack, and then they have a plan that over the course of the next 9 months, if you spend $30, we're gonna support you with more like updates. So I don't know no one knows what those updates are, but to your course of argument, we will see how this is gonna turn out.
Yeah, there you go. I'm glad you brought that up because more and more as I see, you know, games streamed on Twitch and audiences getting to see like full game experiences without paying for it, the harder it is for me as a game publisher or a game investor to say, here's $300 million and 3 years worth of time, go make something and don't show me any sort of profit opportunities until 3 years, 3 months from now. Right? Like that is just drying up as an option for game funding. I see less and less in that. Other than first party, I don't know how those types of deals are going to continue to happen. I just don't see the market, you know, we're just not in that age anymore, you know. It's just...
And to your argument, like Destiny 2 is not a turn anymore. So hopefully we can really analyze if this is how this is going to turn out to be over the course of a full year span. But okay, so anyway, it's really good these days. Then.
If you were like me and Brandon, who like jumped in, didn't like what we played in Destiny 2 when we initially played it and haven't touched it, is now a good time to go back and give it a shot, thinking that we're going to get what we paid for?
I would say so, yes. I would say yes. Again, their level design hasn't improved much, but the whole aspect that you are working towards something and there are rewards in that end that are actually kind of cool is very enjoyable. It has become very enjoyable. There was a period that I also quit, and then I came back and I was like, okay, this DLC 2 is actually righting a lot of wrongs, and I've enjoyed so far. And you'll see that the new DLC is coming. I would say wait till the new DLC maybe comes out and see how the feedback on that one is. But so far it's so good. It looks pretty good.
All right. So let's switch gears a bit. So comic book universe. Anything in the comic book universe that you want to talk about? Especially the Disney deal has already come through. People are talking about, you know, very excited about X-Men Phase 4 is gonna start.
I actually think Fantastic Four would come first before X-Men. I think they really want the big baddie for Phase 4 and 5, and I think Galactus and Doctor Doom are the ones that are gonna be for Phase 4 and 5, because they already got rid of all the big baddies that, like, some of them are so stupid, like Fing Fang Foom, like all like comic book villains are pretty stupid. But
if you say Fing Fang Foom to a 15-year-old today, he's gonna think you're making fun of Brandon.
I would think the same thing. He's like, wait, what did you just say, dude? My name's Brandon Fang. So you actually think? So you don't think? Well, they have. From what I remember, they have 2 X-Men movies in the making that had production problems, like the Dark Phoenix.
Yeah, they pushed them back. They pushed the one that was supposed to be scary with the mutants.
The horror one.
Yeah, and then they had the full. Not Days of Future. They have the one with Jennifer Lawrence and the main cast, the mainline cast, also pushed back. It's with the Dark Phoenix one. They also pushed that fully back. But in general, I think X-Men. I think they are in good place because like Deadpool is doing very well. I don't think they're gonna touch that as much and they really wanted that Fantastic Four side of things to come in. And also they really want that what's the scroll, like I'm not big into like this side of like cosmic side of the comics, but I know like scroll is accounted as very big villains, so they could be pretty big for for future villains. Yeah, but I actually, it's funny, like the comics is I was the other day I was trying to buy comics. It's so hard to buy comics in like Barnes and Nobles. Like now you have to just buy them as like full books.
Comics, it's too niche. Unfortunately, look, I'm gonna say this, and I know I'm gonna piss off a lot of people. 2018, just from a business sense, comics aren't selling to all the people like they used to. There's so many different ways that people can consume comic media or entertainment media or things to occupy their time that they pay money for. I don't feel like comics is getting the same support it was 15 years ago, 30 years ago.
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like
Even
I'm
the
not saying
digital
it's dead.
platform, I don't really have friends that constantly tell me, "Oh, there's a new awesome comic that just came out." No one talks about it really anymore, in that circle.
And the fact is, like, there are no more. There are no artists that I hear about in the comic world either. Like there was, like, let's say 15 years ago, there was the Jim Lees, Joe Madureiras, like these guys. You would kill even if the guy does, I don't know, Daredevil number 54. You would find that Daredevil number 54 because Clayton Crane drew it, and it's a gorgeous art piece just to look at. And I don't think this exists anymore.
Look at it this way. Joe Mad at the time, and I'm throwing this, I'm not going to say his name because I actually don't know how much he was paying. But once I say this example, it's going to make sense. Top level comic book artist can work his ass off to get paid $58,000 a year to be a famous penciler, or he could simply go into the games industry and be a concept artist and get paid double that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's like...
Yeah. The last deal I've heard was a Netflix deal because they were developing their own comics to Netflix kind of movie thing, which is very profitable, right? It's a very smart business. So they're like hiring a bunch of comic guys and artists and writers to develop new comics, test that idea in the market, to eventually develop that into a TV series and movies of their own, because superheroes aren't going anywhere. They're just gonna get bigger. People love them. If it's well done, people want more. So that's the only thing I feel like as a comic artist that you have to try to. I guess it has a lot to do with book deals too, right? It's like you're writing a book to hopefully eventually make a movie out of it, especially young adult readers, right? I think comic books are kind of similar. It's like, proof of concept, build an audience around it, and then hopefully Netflix or some other movie studio will pick it up, because everyone's always looking for the next thing that isn't Marvel or DC, right? That's already owned.
It's so hard to come up. It's so hard. Like, I remember everyone that was great artists left Marvel and DC to Top Cow, and they looked great. All their art, all their work, but I don't think any of their cells went anywhere, and they are all kind of dead now.
Well, I think what I can say is comic books will always probably be. I don't want to say always probably. Comic books is my favorite storytelling medium that I've got to enjoy in my childhood, that I still have a special place for. And like you said, Brandon, they're doing test runs, right? Like, we want to tell this story in a very cheap way and see how much excitement we can get visually and through story. Comics is a great way to do that because video requires acting, it requires shooting, it requires special effects. Just having someone draw someone flying versus someone CGing someone flying, two different scenarios. You know what I mean? So I get it for like a test bed for stories, but even in that type of execution, you're already admitting that there's no long-term plan to support the move of making the comic series, which is respectful of the platform.
It definitely requires. It's gonna have to come through, in some type of app form. Like it's gonna be a new way to tell comics without having it. It might be the storyboarding, like really not too animated, but still some new way of consuming comics for people to digest it, because the idea of downloading something to kind of flip through it like a book is long gone. But if you add more production value to it, but not to the point of a movie, I feel like the next step would be some kind of app that has that style. People would like.
I got one for you. And this is just I'm spitballing again. I would love it if you guys ever look at those VR apps like Quill or Medium or whatever those draw like live in, turn the art around and all that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I would love like a linear sequence of this like live in 3D art that I could like panel 1. I see the hero busting through the window, but like the glass shards are kind of suspended in time, and like I can be in the moment. Maybe subtle animation, but like just little vignettes with story. Over and over and over and over.
It's gonna have to be, it has to be something like that. Something with AR maybe would probably be the next logical. But I mean, it's still really relative. Obviously, like all the great stories are coming from it, but they have to do it through the app, I think, to really transform the medium and add a little more production than just one guy drawing and one guy telling the story. It definitely requires more sound effects and some kind of like. It could be AR, man. I really do think it's something, and maybe companies are already working on this, but they know that the ending is gonna be very strong, which is a movie deal, right? If it's a good story, so there's probably a lot of investment to kind of figure this out, where the beginning is not so harsh.
Yeah. But that's pretty cool idea. But even like I have a question from you, Larry. You said like you really love comics. When was the last time you read a comic book?
Larry's out of the room right now, but until he returns.
I used to love reading comics, but even me as a person, I think the last time I read a comic book was maybe a long time ago.
No. So that question that Shora just asked, when was the last time we've actually popped open a comic? Personally, for some reason, I still like reading manga, like of my favorite stories, because I like to know what's next, and that requires an anime obviously going at the same time. A manga kind of let you skip ahead, and that's the reason why I read manga is just to kind of skip ahead. Maybe that could be the reason why comic books could work, because right now it's kind of disjointed, right? You got the movies, you got the comic books. It's kind of independent from each other, and there's no really any reason for me to grab a comic book to kind of find out what's the next story. It's just an alternate history type of thing anyways. But it's very disconnected. That's the thing too. The movies are doing well, but for some reason, they don't tell you in the previews, like, hey, go grab the comic book if you want to know. There's no cross promotion. It's a very separate community, and they keep segregating that way.
That's pretty good.
I'd say for me, the last comic book I opened was probably a Battle Chasers comic, like 10 years ago, 11 years ago.
That's what I mean.
When I rebought it off of Amazon because I used to love Battle Chasers.
Yeah.
Now, I personally just like, there are certain artists that I thought I missed out on, and I discovered them later on. I like recently, maybe like, there are times that I just bought their books because of the artist, regardless of the narrative. I really love Clayton Crane's artwork. And I just recently have been on a tear of just buying his older comic books that he drew. And I just love looking at them. But to read one, probably, it's been a long time ago.
Well, let's look at the ugly stepchild of the comic book world, right? The DC universe. I have no idea how they're gonna turn out. I mean, Wonder Woman 2 is coming out, but as far as everything else, where the Shazam, right, which is the goofier, lighthearted superhero movie.
Oh god, that looks terrible. Everyone is so raving about that trailer. Oh god, it looks so bad.
But from what I didn't read the Shazam comic book, but from what I've heard, it's like pretty faithful to what it is. It's like it's pretty goofy.
But it looks like a cheap movie, and I don't know. Everyone is so parody, right? Yeah. And the fact is, the problem is the DC fanboys are so like dried up some sort of humor from their narratives that suddenly they see something that has just a little humor whether it's bad or good, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's the best, funniest thing in the world," and it's not. It's actually, if you take it out of the context of DC Comics, it just like looks pretty bad.
You know, it's worth saying. Let's go back to our childhood selves, right? Like, I'm just gonna assume. I'm not gonna assume. Let me ask you guys. When it comes to Marvel superheroes, how many can you name that you actually liked and enjoyed? Versus DC superheroes, how many can you name that you liked and enjoyed?
I'm in the camp where I knew DC superheroes a lot more. I love Batman. I love Superman. I even knew the Flash. I even knew Green Lantern. Like I identify because I grew up watching the Batman animated series. I even liked the Superman animated series. You know, at some point, you know, what was it called? Phantasmagoria or something. The Batman movie was in theaters. Like I went to watch.
Phantasm?
Yeah, the Massive. Yeah. So there was, you know, I definitely grew up on DC characters more, and I still like those characters, especially those animated movies that come out. I still love watching them. But the movies have just been horrible. It's just mishandled.
Good God,
like,
Justice League is terrible. It's so bad.
Like, so even with the Nolan movies, right? I liked like the first one, but there to me like here's the discrepancy. I actually like Ben Affleck's Batman in terms of look, right? Batman Affleck looks like Batman to me more than Christian Bale. Christian Bale looks like Nightwing to me. Like he's a lot slimmer.
He's a little too short for that.
Too short for Batman and not as raw. But you know, Nolan's movies infinitely a lot better, obviously. But there were problems with those movies where I didn't like, where you know they would always interject like little one-liners in between the action, which was
I love those.
I hated those, man. I was like, God, what is this? Like
that's the main reason I love Batman Begins. It's just like, does it come in black? There's so many good lines.
But I like the second one. But even the second one had little moments like that kind of took me out of it, right? Obviously, Heath Ledger's performance was really good. The third one was terrible. I didn't like the third one. But like, it seems like they haven't had a Batman movie or Superman movie where overall it was like untouchable to me, right? Because even the Christopher Reeves one, at the time it was cool, but looking back, it's kind of goofy. Like his acting was great. Like I think he had the best like. You know, from Clark Kent to Superman transition, like it was the most believable out of all the acting. But there was just elements that I liked, but there's something always in those movies, in the DC movies, that's a little off that, you know, as a whole, I couldn't like
even let's say the Wonder Woman, as much beloved that movie was, the last third of that movie is terrible. It's atrocious. It's essentially
were you the one that said that you didn't like because they had a boss fight?
It's just a mishmash of bad CG with lightning. All I remember from that last act is just that it's so bad. It's exactly reminded me of Iron Man 1. Iron Man 1 to me is 2/3 of a very good movie, and Wonder Woman was 2/3 of a very good movie also. So.
All right, well, Shora, damn it, since you know so much, what is the best way to deliver in that last third? What's the point that they all miss?
You know, sometimes just going bigger doesn't mean it makes it better. I always remember, you know, World War Z, the movie. They essentially, the scale is really big, but they ran out of budget essentially in the end. And they shot the last third of the movie in a very small location with $8 million. And that movie actually kind of ends itself very well if you look at it as a package. Or even you look at the last Wolverine movie, the ending just didn't mean a bigger boss fight. Like, you know, the whole world was collapsing. No, you can limit the stakes. I don't think having the whole world collapsing on itself and all of it is the solution. And any movie who resorts to, the humanity is falling, the entire world is in jeopardy, I think that's the actually bad resolution for any of these superhero movies.
Humans in 2018 don't give a shit about humans they don't know. Like that's the one thing that I'm seeing. Like, everyone is dying in the world. I didn't care about them anyway. You know what I mean? Like it's a tough sell. But I do think I could say, like, if you spent 2/3 of the movie building up a character that I care about, having something very dire or very serious happen to that character, but in a very intimate portrayal, you know, like you did say World War Z, spoiler alert, Brad Pitt coming to the realization, I don't even know his character name, but the doctor that he was playing coming to the realization of what he needed to do to achieve his last objective. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like that was a great scene. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, that was my favorite scene. I actually liked it way better than the zombie piling on each other.
They built up the story enough that you too knew the sacrifice that was being made.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
I mean? And then you saw what happens, right? So you're like, oh fuck! Like there was emotional involvement in that scene. But like crescendo always being like every instrument in the orchestra playing all at once. Yeah, I agree.
Even like the Nolan movies, when you think about them, the last third is just about the character versus character for the most part. It's the third one that is like tries to get the scale again very big. The entire Gotham City is collapsing, you know, take people out. That's the one that, you know, kind of ruins the movie. But in general, I think when the stakes are very limited, it makes the movie actually better.
Yeah. Show me one person who's about to lose everything, but make sure that I care about that person.
Yeah.
Don't show everybody losing everything. Like, oh my god.
Just show me Chris Bale's face crying and just really hurting.
Man, I've seen Dark Knight 4 times in theater at the time. And it still wasn't my favorite movie of the year that year. So.
Sure. What's your favorite movie of all time? Like, what is your movie that is the best example of a complete movie?
The thing is, my phone is dying. Jeez.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing. Yeah. Why is it not dying? I died.
It's giving you just enough juice to say the answer to the question.
Yeah, say the answer. We're cutting you off. He's dying off.
Oh, damn it.
He's done. Look, he's done.
Well, that's the perfect cliffhanger for a podcast. Shit. Well, I got no rhyme this time. I'm Larry Charles. I'm saying good night.
Yeah, thank you for joining us for the first episode of Pop Culture Thoughts with Shora. Shora had to go, like a superhero exit. Please comment if you really want to know his thoughts. Please message us, and maybe we'll post it, or maybe he'll follow up in the next episode.
I'm back. Yeah, definitely let us know how you feel about this podcast. It's something that we're trying out new, so let us know your opinions, please, in the comments or in Discord, anywhere you can that you know that we read, on our Facebook. We'd love to see your thoughts. Email even. All right, I'm gone for real this time.
See you guys.